Thanks everyone for attending the 16th lecture of this cycle on the contemporary political topics organized by the PhD in Political Science, UIB Association, with the support of the Praxis Research Center. Well, I hope that presentation and the debate will be productive for all of you. Today you will have as guest speaker Lucrecia Burges, and as moderator my colleague Sónia de Sá, who is a LabCom researcher and invited assistant professor at the Department of Communication, Philosophy and Culture. And politics, sorry. And but most especially Sonia is a research engaging in the defense of women's rights, I know. Well, I thank you both for accepting the invitation, and immediately I give the word to Sonia. Please, Sonia, thank you for all.
Thank you, Maria João. Good afternoon. Welcome to Dr. Lucrécia Burges, Associate Professor of Moral Philosophy from the University of Baleares Islands, to whom we thank, of course, to the present and the topic so pertinent and pressing that brought us today in this session, very interesting session. Under the theme, Surrogacy, Reproductive Mercantilism and the Suppression of Human Rights. This work vindicates against surrogacy from an ethical feminist perspective, starting from the fact that whatever the perspective from which it contemplates, social, cultural, economic, educational, age or race, there is a prior asymmetric situation that enables and conditions the practice. Let's hear now Professor Lucrécia Burges. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Let's see, I want to share my, so let's see if I can move it a little bit. Okay, right.
It's all clear, it's all clear.
Okay, right. Well, first of all, I want to thank Professor Maria João Cabrita for her invitation to participate here today with this presentation. Thank you very much, Maria João. I also want to thank Sónia de Sá for introducing me. And thank you all for your attention and for your time. I also want to take the opportunity to apologize for my English. I have not practiced in a while, so please excuse my use of the language and my pronunciation. I want to start this presentation with a series of quotes from well-known authors that, in my opinion, illustrate and frame the topic that I am going to present. Simone de Beauvoir said that motherhood should not be conceived as a destination, but rather become a free project. Lydia Falcón reminded us that the material causes of feminine exploitation have their roots in biological nature. Angela Davis largely stated that feminism is the radical idea that women are human beings. Rita Segato pointed out that patriarchy has always beat on women's bodies. And it's Ana de Miguel who asks that not everything that is technically possible is ethically desirable. Let's start. In this presentation, we will see the following aspects. First of all, I will introduce the topic briefly. Then we will deal with the terminological issues. We will see how intentional language is used to hide the real problem after the practice. After that, we will focus on the primacy of desire over the universal human rights. Later, we will argue that the altruistic fallacy entails, what the altruistic fallacy entails. And finally, I will present the conclusions. As Sonia said when she introduced the work, I want to start asserting that this work vindicates against surrogacy from an ethical feminist perspective, starting from the fact that whatever the perspective from which is contemplated, that social, cultural, economic, educational, age, or race, there is a prior asymmetric situation that enables and conditions the practice. Intersectionality considered in its entirety. This is how the sum of all its vectors is a key and it's a determinant factor in the hiring of women for reproductive purposes. The pregnant mother is always, invariably, in a situation of inferiority and vulnerability to the intended parents. In this presentation, we will highlight the dangers involved in the practice called surrogacy. One of the main dangers is the discourse use of the language. The terminology chosen to describe the practice is euphemistic and it's tricky. It leads the population to a lack of knowledge and a false idea of what surrogacy is in itself. Instead of surrogacy, we think it must be called what it really is: reproductive mercantilism. The perverse use of the language is intended to hide the main danger of the practice. Surrogacy supposes the suppression of all universal human rights of the pregnant mother and her child. Treated as objects, they renounce not only to the right to filiation, but also their autonomy as subjects, their dignity, and equal, free, and fair treatment. The situation of prior asymmetry between men and women promotes and establishes the practice. Surrogacy reveals what feminists has been fighting and denouncing for years. First, that women, instead of being conceived as subjects with full rights, are mainly and fundamentally reduced to sexual objects. Second, that women are commodified objects. Surrogacy takes the commodification to the extreme, to a human basic capacity, that's gestation. And that's the absolute commodification of the existence. In this presentation, I will try to show how the practice of surrogacy is based on the invisibility of the women as a subject and supposes the suppression of all her human rights. At this historical moment in which neoliberal capitalism articulates patriarchal interest, the surrogacy industry becomes an international and transnational industry. This paper argues against the mercantilization of humans' reproductive capacity and the trafficking of babies. The pregnant mother is always, as we pointed out before, in a situation of inferiority and of vulnerability with the respect of the intended parents. We will go now through the terminological considerations. We will see how a language is a tool for emotional disaffection. If you go to the dictionary, the definition of surrogacy is: first adoption, is a method of assisted reproduction where intended parents work with a gestational surrogate who will carry and care for the babies until birth. Second, is an arrangement often supported by a legal assessment whereby a woman, the surrogate mother, called gestational surrogate, agree to bear a child for another person or persons who will become the child's parent after birth. They are called the intended parents from the beginning of the process. When we face the problem in question, we realize that there are several terminological traps in which those who seek to decriminalize the practice, that's it, the hiring of women for reproductive purposes, want to make us fall. We are going to begin by underlying the perverse use of the language made by people, by companies, by institutions in the name of the practice. By using the terminological euphemism, emotional disaffection is intended. They want the people to not become aware of what the practice entails. By substituting the term motherhood for gestation, and then gestation for surrogacy, the recognition of the affectivity of the female subject, the pregnant mother, is hidden, denied, silenced in a biological, physical, and psychological process of a maximum emotional resonance. The expression of surrogacy is based on the idea that it doesn't matter who carries the baby. The female subject is made invisible and the praxis is camouflaged. Control and commodification of human beings, women, pregnant mothers, and the children resulting from the sad transaction. The terminology surrogacy, surrogate bellies, sometimes surrogate wombs, thus doesn't satisfy us either, since it underlies a dualistic vision of human nature, which reduces the woman and her entire organism to a single part of it, and in this way continues to contribute to the invisibility of the problem, to the invisibility of the female subject, the pregnant mother, and the visibility to the subject in the gestation process, a human being, who will be commodified as soon as he, she, or they are born. Very often, they are twin pregnancies. They are the object of an economic transaction. In our opinion, the practice should be described for what is it: renting women for reproductive purposes, and should be named for what is it: reproductive mercantilism, with the emotional charge that this was supposed. Another terminological trap that we find ourselves in which emotional disaffection is present, is to call a basic human capacity, a biological process, pregnancy and childbirth, an assisted reproduction technique, and to try to regulate based on this name. Gestation is a biological process. It involves the transformation of a cell into an embryo, the transformation of an embryo into a fetus, and that of the fetus into a person. We insist it cannot be classified as an assisted reproductive technique. However, without any doubt, it can be classified as an extreme obstetric violence, and also as the commodification of a human capacity, station, which is and must be inalienable. By qualifying pregnancy as an assisted reproductive technique, the female subject, the pregnant mother, becomes invisible again. The woman is objectified, she's mutilated, she's turned into a machinery body, into a machinery belly, a womb, an uterus that is rented for productive purposes. She's denied the status of a human being, a person, a woman, a mother, a pregnant woman, subject that feels, that suffers. The primacy of desire, that's it, to make matters worse, at the same time that the status of the human being, the mother, the pregnant mother, is denied, a denomination is invented by which the status of those who wish to be parent is recognized. From the beginning, they are called intended parents, parents of intention. To satisfy the desire of these people, intended parents, all the universal rights, all the universal and basic human rights of the expectant mother and the children resulting from the pregnancies are violated. Let's go to the primacy of the desire, and we will look at it as it affects as a double intentional emotional manipulation. On one hand, those who seek to decriminalize the practice make use of the obvious emotional manipulation when they show the cases of usually heterosexual couples in which women are not fertile, who tell their entire life story and focus their existence on the desire to become mothers. In the purpose emotional manipulation, those who seek to decriminalize the practice present as someone close to them, a woman and her vital drama, in a double attempt to generate empathy at the public opinion. She empathizes with her pain first and with her happiness after, when she holds the baby in her arms. However, on the other hand, they do not show the hidden side of the coin, the hidden side of the story, the reality of the pregnant woman in their life situations. They are not shown. Pregnant women in inhuman condition in impoverished countries are not shown. It's not shown how these women are forced to silence and to deny their emotions in impoverished countries. Also, it is not shown how pregnant women in the so-called first world, such as US Golden State, California, state that allows this practice, the pregnant woman receives psychological therapies to prevent the development of the maternal attachment bond with the baby. They receive psychological treatment focused on preventing the emotional, the affective bond between mother and the baby from being established during pregnancy. This psychological condition to avoid maternal attachment is a cruel emotional manipulation, and obviously this is not shown. When those who seek to decriminalize the practice use the emotion and the feeling of the intended parents, the only possible response is that of the emotion and feeling of the expectant mothers and the innumerable emotional, physical, and mental bonds that they establish with their babies during the pregnancy. In the conflict between desire and right, the desire must not win. Mustn't win. Not when the desire materializes through the signing of an abusive contract that requires the renouncement of a fundamental right. The signing of the contract requires the renouncement of the filiation right, the right of filiation, and the suppression of the considered universal human rights as autonomy, dignity, equality, and freedom. Let's see. The violation of universal human rights. The misname surrogacy is circumscribed in a global social, political, and economical context. It is the result of the crossroads formed by the strongly assumed, extended, and rooted patriarchal logic and the market demands that dominate neoliberal capitalism. In this situation, the issue of autonomy becomes relevant because the first battle, the hardest, is the one that you fight against yourself. Neoliberal capitalism provides the patriarchy with the discourse of free will, or freedom of choice, or free consent, and individual autonomy, investing the practice of surrogacy of a false autonomy of women reproductive subjects, when their autonomy is not such. The autonomy of the individual ceases because it is disconnected from the social, economic, and political conditions of the subject. The discourse that exploitation is a free choice of those who do not have resources or other tools to be able to be in another place of social structure converts the so-called autonomy of women into the heteronomy of the pregnant mother. The will is not determined by the subject reason, but what is alien to it. Heteronomy is a concept that denotes the expropriation of the power that accompanies human demand. Here, it is associated with a broad process in which the subject becomes aware of her body, her health, her finite condition, her vulnerability, her loneliness. In the practice of surrogacy, there is the inevitable submission of the female subject to contextual, economic, socio-political conditions, which implies the loss of moral freedom and autonomy. Heteronomy is a concept that is applied to a human being that lives according to the rules that are imposed on it. The pregnant mother is an heteronomous subject, not an autonomous subject. Heteronomous reasoning proposes that the rules are objective and invariable, and they must be complied because the authority orders it. This is the case that happens in the gestation contract, in which the pregnant mother, when she signs it, she loses her freedom and she loses twice her autonomy. Her living conditions had conditioned her, and then the signing of the contract results in an absolute loss. No matter what occurs, what happens during the pregnancy, the signed contract prevails. The practice of surrogacy is based on the signing of a contract by which the pregnant mother renounces her basic and inalienable human rights. she renounces to decide on herself, her present and future living conditions, commercializing her existences and that of her baby. At the same time that she renounces the right of filiation over her offspring. This practice violates the basic and the universal human right pregnant of the mother and the children. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights says in his first article, all human beings are born free and equal in dignity and in rights. Concerning equality, it goes without saying, but we will briefly empathize that a context of global injustice, this trait relocates reproduction and affects inequality and geopolitically asymmetry. Pregnant mothers are always and invariably poorer and more vulnerable than intended parents. Freedom is reduced and subject to the signing of a contract. Remember, the signed contract prevails, no matter what happens, prevails. There is not informed consent, which means that at any time the woman can back down. It is not informed consent. That is a must, as you know, in bioethics law of patient. It is no way that we can speak of woman's freedom of choice, if its entire legal apparatus is aimed at the fact that when she has signed the contract, the woman lost entirely her freedom. Dignity. That's very sad. Dignity has disappeared when we must vindicate the personal status of women. It is disheartening to have constantly remind ourselves at this point in the 21st century, that's it, 2021, this year, that dignity is an inherent value of the human being. It's intrinsic, it's inherent in the very fact of being human. It's a quality inherent to the being, to the human being. This means that it cannot be granted, nor it can be withdrawn. It carries unconditional respect and establishes certain indisputable rights. As all of you know, this principle of respect coincides with Kantian imperative. A person cannot be treated as a mean for other purpose, but always as an end in itself. The maximum. Human beings are always subjects, never objects. This is the starting point of the Enlightenment reason, the one that Kant uses in his work, The Metaphysics of Customs, in which he maintains that the human being has no price, but rather dignity, intrinsic value. At this point of the 31st century, the vindication for the dignity of the women, mother, pregnant women, is more present than ever. It is impossible to guarantee in practice the principle of dignity of a person if it's not materialized in the living conditions of each citizen, guaranteeing equality and freedom. The extreme commercialization of the hiring of women for reproductive purposes violates, in addition to the rights of the mother, all the rights of her child. Let's not forget that the object of the contract is the delivery of the baby. The object of the contract is the sale and the purchase of a human being. When the contract is signed, the surrogate mother also loses the right of filiation. The legal, social, and anthropological bonds that it establishes between ancestors and descendants. The right of filiation originates parental authority and is decisive. It's inherent in a birth registration. Parental authority for mothers is a right that was achieved after much struggle, after a lot of vindication, a lot of fight. It was granted to the women in Spain by the law in May of 1981. Was one of the great feminist achievements in our country, in Spain. I think in Portugal, the law is from 1984, 3 years later. It's very close. I want to start very briefly this point of the altruistic argument, the altruistic surrogacy. I think it is very important and it is so relevant that I will mainly focus it in a specific paper, in a specific work lately, in another moment. The fallacy of the altruistic argument. Surrogacy is prohibited in most countries. In the European Union, is prohibited in Spain and is subject to the law in all its versions. The legislation regulating surrogacy processes in Portugal has undergone several modifications in recent years. Portuguese surrogacy law from 2016 only allows non-commercial surrogacy. That's it, the altruistic way, not the altruistic surrogacy. It's known as altruistic surrogacy and is allowed only for heterosexual couples. Let's see let's see what does altruistic surrogacy means and implies. Altruistic surrogacy means that the surrogate mother cannot receive any compensation for the pregnancy. She cannot accept a donation from the intended parents. The intended parents can take charge of the medical expenses, but they cannot pay the surrogate mother. The altruistic argument contains. Can you hear me? Yes.
Okay. Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. The altruistic argument contains, as we see, a sexist conception that starts from the assumption that woman is a sublime being, a sublime human being who sacrifices herself for others. That is the imaginary that underlies the fallacy of the altruistic argument. Fallacy, because if a woman decides to gestate altruistically, there is not remuneration in return. It is not even possible to enter into assessing the hypothetical case of someone who, genetically related or with a very strong affective bond, is willing to be gestated by another person. In countries where the practice can only be altruistic, the cases are practically nil. None of them. But what does this practice, the altruistic surrogacy, implies? That's the important issue. Why do you appeal to sentiment, altruism, generosity to legalize the practice? Why? Why does altruism always occurs, always comes from women with fewer resources, more impoverished, vulnerable, to women and men unknown, with greater economic capacity? What does altruistic surrogacy imply? Altruistic surrogacy favor and increase the reproductive markets. Very few births will be the result of a true altruistic will. However, this regulation would favor the automatic registration of people who have to go to the reproductive market. That's it. It would open the door for children born as a result of this practice to be registered in countries like India that restrict the hiring of women for reproductive purposes to citizens of the country where there is a regulation, a favor regulation. An altruistic surrogacy counts as a favor regulation in that countries. Market. The market is relocated to India. India allows the practice, but only for Indian people or for those countries who permits, who allows the practice. We vindicate that this is an issue where there's no room for an intermediate solution. An intermediate solution facilitates and promotes the reproductive practice, the reproductive market. Let's face the conclusions. We are totally against surrogacy in any of its versions, because it implies, as we said, the confluence of the patriarchal and the neoliberal capitalist market logic. This logic materializes in the naturalization of sexual and reproductive inequality, the exploitation and sexual violence against women, the use and the abuse of women's bodies and their reproductive capacities. It increases the vulnerability of women, the feminization of poverty, the control and the commodification, the mercantilization of reproduction, the system of satisfaction of our wishes, our desire, we convert it into rights through money. Happiness depends on the ability that we have to satisfy those desires. This is very sad. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Lucrécia. This very, very interesting theme and an issue that allow us certainly to think in numerous cases that we know. Here in Portugal, we have one very mediatic one, which is a child of a professional soccer player. I forgot the name, Jesus Christ. Cristiano Ronaldo.
Yes.
Yes.
And of course, we don't know where or who the mother is. But yeah, let's first. I'm very emotional. I can say it now, because I'll have to say I always wanted to be a mom, and I couldn't. And this issue is very important issue that I like to read about, but not that much study about, because I'm very related. But now. I will open now for some questions, comments, debates, discussion, because I'll have some questions here, but I want to hear you. We can stop now the
chair.
The screen.
I'll try.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. How can I do it?
Okay.
It's up.
I think.
In red. You can say stop the share screen.
Okay. Okay, problem. No problem.
Questions?
Well,
Sim?
Well,
Ju.
I'm doing a little, well, Lucrecia.
Sorry, Maria João, I was distracted. So yeah, first you. Okay.
It's
Sorry.
possible. Lucrecia, it's possible. Well, thank you very much for your excellent communication and your beautiful English.
No, not beautiful.
No,
it's not very hard and painful for me.
Well, this subject is very controversial, I think, because your focus is in the human rights and with the point of view of the woman pregnant and not for the point of view of the couple or one person, because it's possible one person, only one person. I'm like very much your exposition. Well, I would like to ask you, when you think that this violation of human rights evident in the case, in this case, is due. Well, you talk about this is due solely to the view of women as a social reproducer, or well, but something else. You talk about this mercantilism, and you mentioned that a society that is in crisis submitted this neo-capitalism and the idea that everything can be sold. This idea that it's very bad idea for Kantian people like me. But it's possible you talk a little, say something about this in crisis of vulnerability of women, and especially this question about the feminization of poverty, this point of poverty in this case. You understand me, Lucrecia? You try.
I think so. I will try to answer as
okay.
best as I can. Well, it entails, I think it entails an increase in poverty and the vulnerability of women, because it, as I try to point out, it relocates the industry. It's a transnational industry, and is relocated in impoverished countries. And countries like Ukraine and India, they have like a huge market there. They have like kind of an industry. They have women farms, as they call over there. Women who are living in human conditions, pregnant women that they are hired there, and the life conditions of these women are really impoverished and very sad and very different, obviously, to the intended parent, who usually they are couples of the so-called first world or north or developed countries or developed countries. Yes, I talk also about the vulnerability of the women who lived in first countries, also in developed countries, as the Golden State of California. At the United States, they have their own regulation. Each state regulates the practice and is allowed in California, one of the richest states of the country, one of the richest places of the world. But the women who are hired there to be pregnant mothers. They used to be, at the first time, they used to be students. They used to look after, they used to seek at the universities to find out students who will carry the babies, usually because they have this kind of idea that the women who goes to the university, they have nice and well capacities, and also they need the money because the universities and the fees over there are so expensive, like $50,000 to pay the fee each year. No? So you can find the vulnerability, or I can see it if you want to, or you have to be a gestational mother in order to study at the university or to pay for this also. So I don't know if I explain myself very well, but I try to focus on the relocation of the industry to impoverished countries, but also the condition of the mothers of the wealthy countries, as the state of California in the United States, the conditions. And it's very sad. I don't know if I point it out sufficiently, but I think it's very sad that in these countries, in California, at the 16-week pregnancy, they start this therapy, psychological therapy with the mothers. It is usually a group therapy also with all pregnant women, pregnant gestational mothers, and they try to prevent the bond that the mother established with the baby during the pregnancy. Repeating them that this is not your baby, this is another one's baby, because they have had a lot of problems with the right of filiation when a mother, when the gestational mother wants to turn out the signing contract. They say, no, please, I don't want to give up my baby, because it's my baby. They say, no, you sign a contract. And the contract prevails, so it's not your baby. And they don't want to be the genetical mother of the baby, because the judge, the court, give the reason once because it was the genetical mom. So they used to have different fractions of the practice. No, they use different practice. The father sperma can be the father one if they can't, but can you say the egg is not from the gestational mother, because it can be considered genetically the mother. But you have a lot of boundary when you are in gestation, in a state of gestation, as you can imagine.
Thank you, Lucrecia. Angelo?
Well, thank you very much. First of all, thank you very much, Professor Lucrécia, for your excellent presentation. I don't know if you prefer me to post, not a question, but an observation in English, o prefiere que lo haga en castellano.
Si todo el mundo entiende el castellano, me va muy bien que sea en castellano.
Vale. Así que no tengo propiamente una pregunta para hacerle, pero una observación, un pedido para que hable un poco más de un tópico muy particular que ha abordado desde el inicio de su presentación, que dice respecto a la cuestión del lenguaje. Cómo el lenguaje es utilizado aquí como una herramienta para quitar el significado real de lo que no sé cuál es el nombre en español para surrogacy.
Igual, subrogación.
Es que en portugués el término es muy específico.
Claro, el término es muy específico, pero en castellano, que originalmente mi trabajo es en castellano, porque además está muy ligado y circunscrito al contexto, porque como verán y se habrán dado cuenta, según esté regulado en el país, la práctica tiene, ¿no?, pues unas especificidades. Entonces, en castellano, primero se llamó gestación subrogada, ¿no? Sí se hablaba de gestación subrogada, pero cada vez la terminología va siendo menos alusiva, en ese sentido más eufemista, esto es, porque se califica de técnica de reproducción asistida. Entonces, lo que hay detrás es intentar, ¿no?, desenfocar dentro de atención de lo que es el sujeto mujer madre gestante. Y entonces se habla de gestación subrogada primero, pero después, también utilizando la versión inglesa del término, se pasa directamente a subrogación, que ya es, bueno, ¿de qué me están hablando cuando hablan de subrogación? ¿No? Pues es la firma de un contrato verdaderamente. Ese contrato, en cualquiera de los casos, prevalece. En el uso terminológico, en ese tratar de invisibilizar el problema, ¿no?, como si no sé si ustedes han tenido la oportunidad de leer una obra que
Margaret
para mí es
Atwood.
clave.
Margaret Atwood.
No, anterior incluso a la distopía e incluso a Margaret Atwood. No, una obra que es para mí una obra clave de la segunda ola del movimiento feminista es de Shulamit Firestone, una obra de Shulamit Firestone, en la que la autora habla, una feminista radical de la segunda ola, habla de que las condiciones reproductivas de la mujer, como hemos visto en las primeras de las citas, no era esa cita suya, pero ella insiste en este tema, las condiciones reproductivas de la mujer son las que la mantienen en esa condición de, bueno, pues materialmente de indefensión, incluso de subordinación con respecto a los varones. Y entonces propone que para ella la liberación de las mujeres y la igualdad se conseguirá cuando podamos gestar en úteros externos, ¿no? Y imagina como unas incubadoras que gestarían a los bebés. Esto es, ya no tendrían que gestar las mujeres, que es una carga específica de la mujer, la función reproductiva, y esto quedaría en manos de un útero externo, ¿no? Bueno, cuando lo hizo Shulamit Firestone allá en los años 60 del siglo pasado, lo hizo enfocando esa condición que liga a la mujer a esta situación total de dependencia para con la cría, el cuidado y las condiciones de vida universales y propias del trabajo femenino, ¿no?, del trabajo reproductivo. En este caso, la imagen alusiva creo que es esta, dada la vuelta a nivel de la perversión terminológica y a nivel eufemístico. Es como si se gestasen en incubadoras externas, como quien gestase no sintiese ni padeciese, no tuviese ningún tipo de vínculo con el bebé, con la criatura que está gestando. Entonces se habla de técnica de reproducción asistida, y se habla de técnica de reproducción asistida porque no se quiere inseminar a la mujer, se insemina a la mujer, pero no se quiere utilizar su material genético, como trataba de decir antes en inglés, porque entonces si ella es genéticamente la madre, si los óvulos son suyos, puede reclamar el bebé como propio y se lo van a dar, porque genéticamente es suyo. Entonces se utiliza la terminología técnica de reproducción asistida porque el material genético sí puede ser de los padres subrogantes, o si ellos no tienen capacidad y es por eso que acuden a la subrogación, ¿de acuerdo? Pues entonces que sea el óvulo de una mujer donante, el esperma de un varón donante y una inseminación artificial. Aún así, el proceso de gestación no es exógeno, es en el útero de una mujer. También se habla en castellano, a nivel terminológico, que todo esto lo he suprimido aquí porque en inglés la terminología es diferente, de vientres de alquiler. Esta es una terminología muy específica que, decía, es una cuestión totalmente dualista. Es como si la mujer fuese reducida, enfocado única y exclusivamente, su útero, su vientre, y eso fuese lo significativo y lo relevante, como si el resto del organismo no estuviese ahí también realizando sus funciones para que todo fuese adelante. Lo duro del asunto, a mi juicio, es que el contrato firmado prevalece. Lo duro del asunto es que la mujer no firma un consentimiento informado, que es obligado en bioética, la ley del paciente, el decir, tú renuncias a la capacidad de poder decidir sobre tu proceso de gestación, pase lo que pase en cualquier momento del proceso. Renuncias absolutamente. Si las cosas no van bien, lo que sucede en Estados Unidos, en California, es que las condiciones de la madre gestante están medidas al milímetro. Se les dice qué es lo que deben comer, qué actividades pueden y no pueden realizar. Se mide absolutamente todo lo que hace, los análisis, los tests a los que van a ser sometidos, pues sí, las calorías que ingieren, absolutamente todo. Si el embarazo pasa por dificultades, quien toma la decisión son los padres de intención, no es la persona que está sintiendo, padeciendo y gestando. I think I explained myself very well in Spanish.
Sí, puedes.
Like all this intentional and emotional.
Não sei aqui nenhum outro, não sei aqui nenhum que não hable português, portanto
Vale.
te vão a entender agora todos.
Vale.
Normalmente
vale.
há um ou dois que não hablam português, pero hoje não há. Puedes hablar.
Vale.
Pero
vale.
la moderadora no habla en
Pero
castellano.
não há problema, te entendemos em português, Sónia. Tú eres do norte. O norte toda a gente te entende. Aqui é que é mais difícil. Em Portugal penso que se chama barriga de aluguer mesmo. Não há essa distinção.
Mas na lei já está a reprodução tecnicamente assistida.
Sí, pero o termo comum é barriga de aluguer.
Sí, también.
Tanto que surrogacy, traduzido à letra em Portugal, ou traduzido diretamente, é barriga de aluguer.
Sí.
Barriga de aluguer, sí.
Barrigas de alquiler. De alquiler. Igual.
Como se fosse uma parte da mulher que se aluga como se fosse um automóvel, ¿no?
Sí, como esto, como la incubadora, como el externo, que esto, vientre de alquiler, es por eso que la terminología es perversa, el uso discursivo del lenguaje siempre va encaminado a camuflar la práctica, a que uno no tome conciencia de que lo que está sucediendo es la compraventa de un ser humano, que la mujer firma la renuncia a ese derecho de filiación y firma la renuncia a su ser durante todo ese tiempo.
É verdade.
Bom, vamos então perguntar se há mais questões. Sim, Ivo, faz favor.
I don't know if I should speak in English or in Portuguese. In Spanish, for sure not, without at least 2 beers, I would say. So I will try it in English.
To English if you want.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah, but Lucrecia can answer in castellano.
Absolutely, I just
you understand Catalan, yeah.
Absolutely, I will just not to try to speak awful Spanish, Portuguese or something. I will try it in English.
Thank you, Ivo.
So thank you so much. I really enjoy your presentation, but I couldn't stop thinking about how it can be applied to other ethical issues, or at least ethical questions. First of all, it's a little bit hard for me to make some kind of a connection, or such a straight connection, between neoliberal capitalist approach and surrogacy. I truly understand your relation, but I'm not sure if there is any ethical bond that you can clearly identify between economical theory and an ethical issue of freedom of selling of the freedom of your own body or something like that. It's a little bit challenging for me to establish a direct connection between an economical background theory and an ethical one. I understood, but I still think that it's a little bit forcing a little bit a relation. This is just a first comment. I'm very much. I feel very much sympathies with your presentation and with the ethical support of being such a stand against surrogacy. But I couldn't stop thinking about how much this can be applied to prostitution, for instance, and how do you can use exactly the same arguments in order to support the sexual work and the right of sexual work. And this is also something that I could use your final conclusions. I will summarize in the idea that it materializes the neutralization of the sexual and reproductive inequality. Okay, maybe this one it could not be applied, but everyone else could be the exploitation of the sexual violence against women. I would say against the human being, but mostly against women. The use and the abuse of human bodies and their reproductive capacities, absolutely it can be applied to. The increase of vulnerability of women, also applies. The feminization of poverty, the same. The control and commodification of reproduction, the same. The system of satisfaction and wishes, desires, and are converted into the rights through money. This is absolutely, and happiness. So in the same way that left and some, at least in Portugal, the extreme left are very much in favor of supporting the agenda of liberalization of sexual workers under a coverty of new rights for sexual workers. How can you do not relate this also in which perspective, in a way, there are extreme left anti-capitalist perspectives that are in favor of giving more rights for sexual workers, and in the other hand, in the other opposite perspective about the pregnancy, you are already using the same arguments but putting this in the side of the capitalist perspective. In the end, I will just summarize the idea that you remember us based on the Kantian perspective, that I will take that sentence for me for very much further debates, political debates, the idea that the human as a subject and not as an object. I really like to remember this sentence, and I think this can be applied to this debate that I'm very much in favor, but very much also applied under the prostitution perspective. That is also something that personally I have very much ethical questions about. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ivo. And Professor Lucrecia, you can answer in Castellano.
Can I? Okay.
We can all understand you very well.
Okay. I'll try. Lo voy a intentar en castellano. Voy a intentar enfocar bien las respuestas a las consideraciones y preguntas que Ivo me ha hecho. De entrada, tratando de establecer el nexo entre el capitalismo neoliberal y esta práctica que yo denomino, o que nosotros denominamos mercantilismo reproductivo, y que, bueno, es conocida de manera eufemística como subrogación, vientres de alquiler, para mí el nexo es claro, pero además yo apunto a la encrucijada, al cruce, a la encrucijada que se da entre los intereses del patriarcado, por un lado. Yo creo que soy honesta, que presento el trabajo desde una perspectiva ética feminista. Estos son los estándares de partida. Entonces, lo vindico desde esta perspectiva, enfocando que se da un cruce entre los intereses patriarcales y la lógica neoliberal capitalista. ¿En qué sentido entraría la lógica neoliberal capitalista? Pues en el sentido del libre mercado, en el sentido de que están hablando de la libre voluntad de las mujeres a, ¿no?, formar parte de este mercado, este mercantilismo, commodification que dicen en inglés y en la práctica. Revisten, a mi juicio, de libertad de elección la práctica que está condicionada, y es mi punto de partida, por una asimetría, por un presupuesto asimétrico de base. Esto es, son siempre las mujeres las más vulnerables, las que están sujetas a ser, ¿no?, agentes, sujetos en primera instancia, convertidos en objetos, en este caso por el mercantilismo, reproductores, en objetos reproductores, en vientres. Hemos hablado incluso de esa metáfora o alegoría de Sulamith of Firestone de la, pues esto, de la incubadora, ¿no?, de aquello que reproduce. No, es que estamos hablando de mujeres en situaciones de vulnerabilidad en países en vías de desarrollo y de mujeres invariablemente en un condicionamiento social y económico más pobre, incluso en aquellos países desarrollados en los que está permitida la práctica. Entonces, para mí responde a la encrucijada entre la estructura patriarcal imperante y la lógica del capitalismo neoliberal, en la que todo perfectamente entra en condición de mercado, en condiciones de libre mercado. No nos olvidemos que con lo que se mercadea, la mercancía, lo que se compra, lo que se desea y se compra, es un ser humano, es un hijo, es un bebé. Entonces yo el nexo lo veo muy claro. No sé si ahondar demasiado en ello, pero es rotundo para mí. En la segunda de las consideraciones y preguntas que hacía la alusión y la comparación para con la prostitución, pues es muy pertinente, porque verdaderamente dentro, incluso en el seno mismo del movimiento feminista, pues el debate está abierto y desde los inicios del movimiento feminista como tal, en el sufragismo, en la Inglaterra victoriana, una facción del movimiento feminista, de las feministas, reclama, vindica los derechos de las prostitutas, el reconocimiento, la legalidad y los derechos de las prostitutas, ¿no?, la regularización de la práctica de la prostitución. Pero otra de las vertientes de las facciones pide la abolición. Entonces tendríamos aquí encontradas los legalizacionistas y los abolicionistas. Los argumentos que esgrimen los abolicionistas de la prostitución pueden ser, como bien ha apuntado Ivo, pueden ser recuperados y encajan muy bien con las vindicaciones de las conclusiones de esta ponencia. Seríamos abolicionistas también en relación a la prostitución. También.
Muito bem, thank you, Lucrécia. Há mais questões para colocarem? Não há mais questões? Posso, entretanto... Sim, Maria.
Diz, Sónia, sorry.
Ia só mesmo colocar uma questão, se é possível, pode ser, Maria João. Eu não sei qual é a hora em que está previsto encerrarmos.
Estamos bem.
Estamos bem, ok. É mesmo muito rapidamente. You can understand me in Portuguese, no?
I don't know. I'll try.
Okay, I'll speak in English. Yeah, I was thinking in a lot of expressions that you used in your presentation, like female objects or subjects, or this surrogacy context. It's like a suppress of women rights, not just human rights, but women rights. And so on and so on and so on. Okay, like force the silence. These women are forced to be silent and invisible. But in the other hand, I was thinking, like, if I had the opportunity to talk with these women that carries the baby, these pregnant women, and I was wondering if I ask her, you want to do this? Do you know that that the child will not be your own, and that you are like renting part of your body, and you're not allowed to bond with this child? I think she would answer that she needs the money. And maybe she does not have any solutions. So how we can provide some more, I don't know, help or conditions for these women, so we can stop this market. I don't know. I was wondering. I was trying to be them. Without conditions, with their own child to sustain and to help. I don't know if I make myself clear, but I was wondering if I was one of them, I think I will answer the same.
Sí, Sonia, voy a tratar de contestar. Yo creo que parto de la base, siempre es la misma y a veces me siento incluso un poco reiterativa. Esto es, la condición asimétrica es anterior a la práctica. Esto es, la condición de vulnerabilidad está ya ahí. Esas mujeres, como bien has descrito, se encuentran en situación de necesidad y por eso, por esa necesidad, aceptan llevar a cabo una gestación subrogada. Claro, dependiendo de qué mujeres estamos hablando, la respuesta también será una u otra, porque si estamos hablando de las mujeres en Ucrania, estamos hablando de esas mujeres en India, estamos hablando en lugares empobrecidos en los que ustedes conocen, ¿verdad?, el trabajo de Amartya Sen, filósofo, economista, premio Nobel de Economía en el año 98, ¿no?, por su contribución en ese índice que mesura el desarrollo humano, ¿no?, que también ha sido llamado índice de la pobreza. Bueno, pues más adelante trabaja con la filósofa Martha Nussbaum, ¿verdad?, en sus enfoques de las capacidades. Y Amartya Sen lleva a cabo otro índice, lleva a cabo una mesuración cuantitativa en relación a lo que él denomina el índice de las mujeres faltantes. ¿Cuántas mujeres faltan en los países que nosotros denominamos en vías de desarrollo, ¿no?, en esos países de los que estamos hablando, entre los que la India se encuentra, evidentemente? Y entonces él lo mesura. Llega a mesurarlo y la regla es como muy sencilla. Esto es, si mujeres y varones somos aproximadamente el 50% de la población, las mujeres somos el 50% de la población, los varones el otro 50% aproximadamente, ¿cuántos millones de mujeres faltan en estos países? ¿Cuántos millones de mujeres faltan en India? Creo que la cifra que da es como 34,5 millones de mujeres faltantes en la India. Entonces, cuando las condiciones de desigualdad son tan abrumadoras, esto es haciendo, si somos el 50% de la población, ¿cómo es posible que haya este número tan disparejo de varones y de mujeres, ¿no? Habla como la misoginia en el sistema de salud público directamente. En estos países en los que no solamente contempla India, Bangladesh, China, contempla los países del norte de África, del Caribe, etc., ¿no? Países en distintos lugares del globo terráqueo en los que los índices de mortandad femenina, de feminicidios, de pues, un desigual reparto de comida, de abortos selectivos, etcétera, 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 llevan a un desbalance de la población enorme. Entonces, las condiciones son tales en esos países que, bueno, pues cuando decimos la condición asimétrica previa, pues establece condiciona la práctica, perdonad por la redundancia terminológica, pero a veces me cuesta ahora expresarme, pero creo que es como clave y decisivo. ¿Qué podemos hacer? Pues no incrementar el mercado reproductivo, e incidir en las condiciones de bienestar, en ese enfoque de las capacidades y en condiciones de salubridad, ¿no? En estos países en vías de desarrollo y en nuestros países desarrollados igualmente, porque lo que sucede en Estados Unidos es también flagrante. Comentábamos antes, van a buscar a mujeres jóvenes universitarias porque saben que las tasas de matrícula son altísimas, porque la matrícula universitaria anual, solo la matrícula ronda los $50.000, más luego la manutención, porque, bueno, pues está claro que la necesidad es la fuente y es el foco. Uno acepta por necesidad. Después lo que trataba de comentar en el trabajo también es que en países como en India, por ejemplo, el mercado reproductivo estaba abierto antes a todos los países, ¿no? Era un lugar en el que uno iba a satisfacer ese deseo de ser padre o de ser madre. Y en un momento determinado se encontraron con la problemática de que muchos países de Europa, los países del norte de Europa, han cerrado tajantemente, prohíben tajantemente la práctica, Francia también. Y se encontraban con que, como no podían ser inscritos los niños como nacidos de esas parejas, de esas madres, de esos padres, pues entonces, como no les dejaban entrar, ser inscritos en el libro de familia, pues entonces se encontraban con muchos bebés sin padre y sin madre. Claro. Y entonces eso les llevó a pues restringir su mercado reproductivo y restringir la práctica a los ciudadanos indios, donde ahí está permitido, en la India, y a países en los que esta práctica estuviera permitida, aunque fuera única y exclusivamente la práctica altruista. Después, ¿quién te dirá? Lo has podido inscribir. Ese es el resquicio. El resquicio es inscribirlo en el registro civil. El derecho a filiación es mi hijo. ¿De acuerdo? Entonces, ¿qué es lo que sucede? Pues que verdaderamente lo que haces es incrementar el mercado reproductivo, porque tú posibilitas la reproducción altruista, pero después verdaderamente es altruista. No, has ido a India, has llevado a cabo allí el proceso de mercantilización reproductiva.
No é altruísta, mas mercantilista, não é?
Claro, totalmente.
Muito bem, muito obrigada. Agradeço mais uma vez. Não sei se, Maria João, podemos terminar.
Maravilhoso. Estou maravilhada.
Também eu.
Não
obrigada então à professora Lucrécia. É Burges?
Burges.
Sim. Muito obrigada.
Muito obrigado. Muchas gracias. Muito obrigado.
Foi uma sessão muito interessante e muito estimulante. E agradeço à professora Maria João Cabrita, minha querida amiga, por me ter convidado e vou agora com um conjunto de pensamentos aqui todos a saltitar num assunto que é tão difícil.
Muito, muito difícil mesmo. Agradeço a Lucrecia.
Muchas gracias por la invitación. Muchas gracias por la invitación.
Espero que la próxima lo haces en Covilhã.
Ojalá la próxima pueda ser allí.
Tiene que ser ahí.
Claro que sí. Ojalá. Muchas gracias por la oportunidad. Thank you very much. Muito obrigado. Me he sentido muy a gusto y en familia. Y las caras muy amigas. Ha sido un placer.
Un placer. Para nosotros também.
Sí.
Bueno, vou fechar a sessão agradecendo a todos, agora em português, que afinal não está ninguém que não fala português, a vocês e a todos que estiveram presentes. Obrigado pelo vosso tempo e até à próxima.
Tchau.
Obrigado, muito obrigado.
Obrigada.
Gracias. Thank you very much. See you soon.